Well, it is 7:05 p.m. I'm going to call this meeting to order. First, I would like to ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. I'm David Atkins, and I will be chairing this meeting. All meetings are recorded by Westwood Media Center. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to record this meeting, please identify yourself so that the audience is aware. Please turn off your cell phone ringers. The agenda is available at the back of the room. The meeting will follow the order on the agenda. The meeting will be civil. All people will be treated respectfully. The format of this meeting will be that when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments, and board members will ask questions of the applicant, and the public will be given an opportunity to comment. When it's time for public comment period, the chairman will call those wishing to speak to the podium. And once at the podium, please identify yourself by stating your name and address for the record. All comments and questions shall be directed through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. First of all, tonight we need to reorganize. We need to elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary. So I would ask if there are nominations for chair.
I nominate Dave Atkins for chair.
I second.
I have a nomination and a second. Are there any other nominations? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
They're all in favor? I'm not going to ask for no's. I was thinking about this, like how to do it. You know, when you vote for election, you don't generally have
You
a...
can vote against yourself.
So,
If you want Mike to do it or Brian, you can do that.
so thank you. I will open nominations for vice chair. Is there a nomination for vice chair?
I don't know if it's been, I nominate Brian for vice chair. Brian Gorman.
Are there any other nominations? Then, all those in favor of Brian Gorman for vice chair?
Aye.
Aye. And for secretary, do you have any nominations for secretary? Well, I nominate Chris Pfaff.
Sure, why not?
Does anyone, Debbie, do you want to be?
No, I'm good.
I second that nomination.
All right, we have a nomination, and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we have reorganized the board. So now, normally, our town planner was not able to be here tonight, but Nora is filling in. And I normally would ask if there are any changes to the agenda.
There's one, it's not really a change to the agenda, but I just want to point out that when you get to number 3, 420 Providence Highway, you'll be asked to schedule this continuous to another date. Before you do that, you might want to consider your calendars and actually set your dates for the summer. So if you could take that, that's further down on your list, if you could just take that out of order.
We just do 2 first and then.
Do 2 and then go to your calendar before going to
Okay.
3.
That sounds like a good plan. So we'll proceed to the second item on the agenda, which is 60 to 90 Glacier Drive, to modify an environmental impact design review public hearing. It's a request from Prime Motor Group, and the applicant would like to present.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board. My name is David Mackwell. I'm with Kelly Engineering Group. We have been working with Prime Motor Group here on this particular site and also on some of their dealerships next door. As read into the record, this is a update to an existing EIDR. And what we are doing here, just for anybody who hasn't been around for the past couple of years, back in 2015 was the first time that Prime Motor Group leased some space in the building. First of all, 60 to 90 Glacier, I see some new faces that might have been here last month, is adjacent to the car dealerships on Route 1, and it is a building that's behind the Mercedes dealership that in 2015 Prime Motor Group leased some space to put a car wash and a detail center and a workshop for their Sprinter vans. in this end of the building. Prior to that time, Prime Motor Group had leased some land space from the landowner in order to store some cars on the property. There's an excess of parking there. They were operating on a short-term permits at that time, and in 2015, we kind of combined all the permits for the entire property, did the parking calcs for everything, all the tenants, and then Prime Motor Group got the excess parking stalls. As time has moved forward, Prime Motor Group has kind of rented some more space. There's been other tenant turnovers within that, and each time, Prime Motor Group comes back to the planning board to update the plan of record for the EIDR, and they also come to update their special permit for the storage use on the site. So that's why we're here tonight. We were actually here last month, but I think there was a little mix-up in the notifications of some sort that we're not aware of, but would like to just go through it again. So this time, the landlord has got a new tenant. The building department did some parking calcs. We're re-upping the plan of record to reduce the number of car storage stalls by 62. I think it's from 326 to 264 car storage stalls. The plan I have here, all the green stalls are for car storage, unregistered vehicles. All the yellow stalls is where the Prime Motor Group employees can park, and the blue stalls are for all of the other tenants on the property. And again, we're here to update the existing permit consistent with the draft decision that's already been prepared. We've had a chance to review it. Everything looks great on there. And again, this is a rehearing of last month's hearing to update the EIDR. We were successful with the zoning board as well to get those permits in place, but we are here to have a new public hearing. So with that, through the chair, we would entertain any questions from the planning board members themselves or any concerned parties in the audience.
Right, and I think at our last meeting, we had a few questions that were answered and all, so I don't have any additional questions, but we've got a couple of new members here, so.
Are you switching green for blue? Is that what you're doing?
No, what we did was we are just reallocating the number of green spaces. And that's it.
They're
So
becoming blue or they're becoming yellow?
we have just reorganized. Yellow really stands for, we've changed the color schemes a couple times on here too, if you're looking down here. The yellow is through the Prime Motor Group employee parking, registered cars. Green is unregistered cars, blue is parking for all other tenants.
So
within
there'll
the
be
building.
more parking for all other tenants
That's what-
under the new
yes,
plan
that's
than
what
there were under the old
So
plan.
swapping green for more
Correct,
blue.
yes, but
Right.
we had other colors on the previous one as well, so. We're
So
trying
just-
to make it more, we're simplifying a little bit.
Okay.
So just to clarify, this was here last month, and there was a mistake in the assessor's office where they advertised all of the hearings for that month with sending out notices to residents within 300 feet instead, I'm sorry, within 200 feet instead of 300 feet. And so we're rehearing each of those. There were, I believe, 2 planning board hearings affected, a selectmen's hearing, and 3 zoning
the-
board
the
hearings that were
abutters were
affected.
not properly
So
notified?
the abutters between 200 and 300 feet were not properly notified, so we re-advertised, sent out new
Okay.
abutters notices, and it's before the board again.
Okay.
Any other board questions, or
Nothing from me.
is there anyone in the audience who found out about this, or anybody who has anything to say on this? Any comments? Yes.
Hi.
Could you come up to the
Sorry, I'm
podium
a few
and
minutes late.
identify?
Jen Killay, 83 Willard Circle.
Oh, you just need the microphone.
Could you
Sorry
take
about
the,
that.
Mic.
Oh, right there.
Oh,
Yeah.
You can share.
Just so that they can hear you.
Take your mic. I can't see it clearly. Where is Route 1?
Route 1 would be over here.
Oh, so this is Route 1. What are you?
Route 1's over here. Frugal Fannings would be over here. Willard Circle will be.
Can you show me on the map, not like out here?
Well, no, because it's actually pretty far away. I don't have a zoomed out map, to be honest with you.
I can show you, I can show you on this,
street map,
oops.
or we can pull it up here.
Yeah, on the zoning map, could you?
What is this?
This is 6090 Glacier Drive. It's behind the Mercedes dealerships, not one of the new dealerships.
Oh. Oh, okay.
It's behind the McDonald's, the
Behind
Mercedes,
McDonald's,
then this
behind
building.
Mercedes, and
got it.
south of Frugal Fannings. So if you're coming in Glacier Drive, it's the building on the left.
where is Glacier Drive? I'm not even familiar with Glacier
Right
Drive.
after the new car dealerships, how you would get into Frugal
Oh, so
Fanny's.
Frugal Fanny's, is that Glacier Drive?
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, okay.
right. So that's why we're, I know you must have got a notice if you're over on Willard, but it's
Yeah.
quite a distance away.
Yeah. I actually didn't get a written notice,
Okay.
but my neighbor told me.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. So what changes are you guys making?
The
It
only-
sounded like you were, I know you were
The
saying you
only
were
changes
reducing.
that are being made is the allocation of unregistered car storage. It's
Okay.
going down from 326 to 264 based on the updated tenant demands within the building. So there's really no changes to the building outside. There's a renovation of one interior space, and we are reducing the number of unregistered cars to be stored on the site.
I see. So I know that I actually came here just to, I
Sounds like
don't
we
know
have
if you're
internet.
just, you're the attorney for Prime Motor Group, is that correct?
We do the civil engineering and the plans.
Oh, okay. So I know that myself and a couple neighbors, and they weren't able to attend, they were just busy, that they were concerned about the lighting. The lighting is really, really bright, and we were hoping that you could possibly think about putting shields on those lights so the light is directed down. It's really
So,
bright. I don't know if
think
this is appropriate here.
This question would be more geared toward the dealerships or, that are on closer to Willard Circle.
Okay, so you,
Joe Rose is here, he can talk to you after about the particular lights, and I
That'd be
think
great.
that they would probably be, willing to get some additional shields or try to help out if the lighting is become bright on you.
that'd be great. All right,
It shouldn't be a big deal.
Okay.
They should all be LED at this point, so.
okay, all right.
We'll put you in touch with him after the meeting. It has talking about a different property, so.
Okay, didn't realize.
That's
I
okay.
didn't-
Thank
I just heard from word of
Well,
mouth.
you heard Prime Motor Group, so you got the right, right user anyways.
This map might help. I finally got it up. Sorry to take so
okay.
long. So this is the building that they're here for,
Yep.
right here. Here's Providence Highway. Here are the three car dealerships. Willard Circle is up here. It's this building right here, on the other side of Frugal Fanny's.
Oh, I
Fanny's is
see.
right in between,
I see.
probably.
It's funny because our neighbor, he actually works in the company back here.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying more and more people are actually like parking down here. I don't know exactly what for. He was wondering that himself.
For 80 Wilson Way? Is that where?
Just not, so I believe, if I can tell by viewing, I believe this is where he works. It's like a.
Algonquin, I think, is in
that
that
what
building.
Okay, what's this one?
80 Wilson Way. Tencor KLA is in there now.
That's it, KLA.
They're the ones moving into the new space.
But
Yeah, I
the-
knew that their company was moving. I didn't know. exactly.
So they're going from here to here, and that's actually what necessitated this change to give them more parking spaces close to this building. So those customer or employees mostly that are parking there will be parking down here.
And there are incidences sometimes of just kids going down and like burning up tires down there. Don't know why. 'Cause
Well, if that ever happens, okay.
It'll be like,
because their Xbox is
Joe, is that
broken.
you?
I encourage you to call the police if you see that activity.
All of a sudden you're here like.
Are there any other questions from the public or any other comments, questions? Now, we have in our packet, we have the draft of what was previously approved at the last meeting. So we could probably entertain a motion to re-adopt that at this point, if that's.
That would be appropriate.
Yeah, I don't have the packet for that plan. It was a month ago you're talking about?
Yes, it was last month. I think Abby would have provided was there a draft
Electronic.
decision?
So there's a memo that is a decision, actually, because it was entered.
Yeah, it was provided in the packet.
So if you're all in favor of the same conditions that were imposed in that decision, you could have a motion to impose the same conditions today.
What were the conditions?
The conditions,
Conditions.
they're fairly standard, but they are, except as modified by the conditions and findings hereof, the project shall comply with the project plans in all respects, and the applicant shall pursue completion of the project with reasonable diligence and continuity. The parking lot shall be striped and maintained as shown on the approved parking plan, which is also attached in these materials. If there are further tenant or occupancy changes or other use changes within the buildings of this property, the applicant shall apply to the planning board to reduce the number of storage spaces to provide the minimum parking requirements to meet the needs of the property's other users, and return to the planning board for a modification, which is what we're doing today, basically. Alterations, modifications, deletions, or amendments to the EIDR approval shall be done in accordance with the requirements of MGL Chapter 40A, Section 9, unless determined to be minor by the planning board at a duly posted public meeting. So,
I make a motion that we approve the identical application that was approved last month, April 24th, 2018. Same conditions would apply.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. I think we also need a motion to close the public hearing.
I move we close the public hearing.
I second that motion to close the hearing.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And the motion passes. The public hearing is closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mike.
Yes. The next item on the agenda is 420 Providence Highway, EIDR public hearing for facade improvements to Tesla car dealership.
So on this one, Tesla is one of the businesses that was also affected by that snafu and notice. So they were before the zoning board last month. They're returning to the zoning board on June 20th, but they'd like a little more time to develop plans for this board. So they've asked to continue it. They said they could be available on July 31st, but I think you need to confirm whether you're available to meet on July 31st. And if not, then a date in August.
So as we were talking, we have, in our packets, we have a proposed list of meeting dates. And we're looking at the, well, we can take a look at that now and see if,
Yeah, might as well do the rest of the summer at least.
so I think that Abby had circulated this, and there were only a couple of conflicts. Brian, you're not able to make the June 26th meeting. I'm out of
Right.
town for the July 17th meeting.
It sounds like there were no hearings on the June 26th.
I was thinking maybe we don't need to have the 26th, and we move the 17th to the 10th or something.
I will not be available on the 31st
Of July, or?
of July.
Okay.
And for the, I am not available August 21st.
It's pesky summer months.
Mhm.
So actually, it might be better if we leave it the way it is, then there's one person who can't make each of the meetings. So we'll have 4 for all the meetings. this
So you can
summer.
make the 31st?
I can't make 31st, but I can make the rest of the meetings.
So you can make that your one miss,
I
watch
can
it
make-
on Westcott and catch up,
Yep.
assuming we don't close it that night. You think we're gonna do that in one night, Tesla?
I think so, because I think most of their work is facade improvements to the building.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of exterior work. They'll probably relocate. They also have storage of vehicles versus parking spaces on the old plan where that building served Audi and Porsche, and Tesla operates in a different fashion, so they'll have more
Reduction.
customer and employee parking and less storage. They take cars that arrive at the site ready-made, as opposed to having a site where you walk around to look at a car.
I need 3 yes votes? on
That is EIDR, I believe, so yes,
Majority
a
vote.
majority
that?
vote.
Right, so even if we had a no, it could still,
It would still,
wouldn't be held up,
right.
right, if Mike was not here to vote.
And if you're not ready to vote in one meeting, then you'd be able to continue it.
Do the rest of the dates look, any other conflicts?
So just so I can make sure I get this back to Abby, the 26th, Brian is unavailable,
The 26th and August 21st.
and August 21st, all right. So on the 21st, both Chris and Brian are unavailable. So that meeting date you might want to change. How about July 17th? Was there someone who was not available?
can't.
Dave can't make it.
Dave. And July 31st, Mike can't make.
Right.
What about the 10th and 24th for July dates instead? Does that make sense for anyone, or, I mean, those are two dates we haven't thrown out yet.
Yeah, if they were open for me, I don't know if Abby,
She indicated she can't make the 14th of August.
Right.
I think if there was a date in July she could make, she would have written that down too.
Right,
Yeah.
I think Abby's,
I'll be away the
Available.
last 2 weeks of July, well, the last full week of July, and 29th, 30th, 31st, into first week of
To
August.
the 24th, you're not here?
I will not be here on the 24th.
Okay.
but to your point, Chris, the 10th does work for me.
Yeah, it works for me.
10th works for me.
So,
would you like to
you'll-
change that to the 10th?
Dave, you're around?
yeah, the 10th work, July 10th?
What about you, Deb?
Debbie, you're around?
Yeah, that should be fine.
All right, well, that can be at least one July date. We all five make it.
Yeah.
So would we cancel the 17th?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, what about with the August one? What if we moved that like to the 14th or something?
Abby can't make that night, the 14th.
Yeah, and I'll be away that day.
On the 14th?
Yeah.
You're away?
How about the 21st?
Oh, I can't actually make
I,
it.
I can't make that, neither can Brian.
Okay.
August.
What about the 7th and cancel July 31st?
The 7th is, I'm free.
You free? August 7th work for everyone else?
August 7th.
Yeah, I can do it.
Works For me, I'll be back, yeah.
One meeting is often enough in August,
Yeah. Well, you just schedule accordingly and
right?
push it to September if you have to.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
August.
So that would give us the 10th, and then the 10th of July to the 7th of August?
Right, so you'd be meeting once a month for
One-
both July and August.
Does that work for you, the 10th?
Yeah.
Okay.
that's fine.
I'm sorry, the 7th of,
So we
I'll just
will-
warn you, your September meeting will be very long, because there'll be pent-up demand, but I think we could probably make that work. So no meeting on,
Wednesday, the 5th?
that's what it is so far,
yeah, because election
That's-
day is the 4th.
right. September becomes very busy because you have the FinCom hearings if there's a fall town meeting.
Right.
So we moved two of them, so that's good.
Okay, so your next meetings then, you have a meeting later this month,
26th.
on the 26th, where there are no hearings right now, but you can have a working meeting. You'll have a meeting on July 10th and a meeting on August 7th, and then not until September 5th.
And are we canceling the 31st?
Yes.
Okay, so 6/26, 7/10, 8/7, that's it for the summer.
Yep.
So then we should, for continuing this,
They indicated they wanted the 31st of July, so maybe that makes sense to do the 7th instead of pushing them up 2 weeks to the 10th.
I don't think they would be ready for the
Yeah, that's what I
10th.
mean.
Yeah.
It's not fair to them.
all right, so I could have a motion to, have we opened that? Should we continue it, or?
Was that open last month?
I don't believe it was. I think it was scheduled to open today. So you
So
can
that's
just
just
open it to immediately continue it, and then to the date and place. I believe you'll be meeting here on August 7th.
I move we open the public hearing for Tesla car dealership tonight and postpone it until Tuesday. I lost my date already.
August 7th.
Is it August the 7th?
August
Yes.
7th, yes.
Here at the Champagne Meeting Room at Carby Street location
At 7 p.m.
at 7 p.m.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. All right. The next item on the agenda, continued public hearing for updates to automobile parking design standards. So who's reviewed these?
Abby and I, have any planning board members had a chance to take a look at them?
Glazed over.
All right, so those of you who have been on the board before know that there was a fairly complicated parking design standards in place with several different diagrams, and there was parking spaces were separated into the stall space, the front overhang, and the rear overhang. A little bit different than most towns do. In most towns, we see that parking spaces are simply 9 feet by 18 feet if it's a perpendicular space, and slightly different if it's a parallel space. So this is trying to change our regulations to be more in conformance with what most other towns do, and with what most businesses come in with when they have their engineered plans drawn up. They just assume that we're looking for 9 by 18 spaces with 24-foot backup. So this rewrites it to make that the default standard. The board can always approve something different if the circumstances warranted. We used to have a requirement in the standards for compact car spaces as well, and that's carried over here. You can have up to 1/3 of your parking spaces would be compact if the 2/3 of them are the full-size spaces.
Do we have anything for electric cars?
We don't have any requirements for parking stations. We could add that.
Oh, just as a thought.
I think what I would do for right now is review on a case-by-case basis and where you think it's appropriate.
Yeah. It just, when, we just talked about Tesla, so it just jumped to mind.
I think that's something that we're going towards in the future, and eventually I don't think you'll need to require it because I think every business will install it, but
Will this rewrite prevent another Stagecoach Plaza?
I would hope it would, because it doesn't have the overhang requirement written in the same way. What it says is you need bumper stops if you don't have a curb. If you have a curb, you don't need those bumper stops. The problem at Stagecoach is they have a curb, but in order to protect cars, keep cars from hitting their building, they put in bumper stops, and they've put them too far back. And so the cars just can't pull in as far as they ought to. And so the parking spaces don't work as designed, and there's far too little space in between the parked cars. So yeah, this would avoid that by not separating the car length into overhang and body spaces.
My question is, now our parking standards are basically drawn from two different standards.
They are.
Is this gonna create a third standard?
No, but this
Or we're
was,
gonna-
any
yes.
new designs, whenever a business would come to you to renovate their space, the new standards would apply. So you would eventually move all new
So
spaces into
supersede
this.
the old standards.
will.
Okay.
Right, but it doesn't
It's
force
gonna stand
anyone,
alone.
right, anyone who has a parking lot developed under the old standards can continue to have that.
Right.
But if they come back to you to ask for a change, they
have
would
to
go
change
under
to
the new
this.
standards.
No
Right.
grandfathering in.
No, so we do that, we do the same thing with drainage standards. So if someone comes back to redo their parking lot, they now have to bring it up to current drainage standards.
Are we losing anything, Nora, with this, going from this to the other? Like, is there any advantage to the current one that,
I don't think so. I think the current one was very complicated. It was established in 1992. Cars were very different then. We didn't have anywhere near as many SUVs, and the overhang distances just don't work with that type of car.
Yeah.
So I think this is actually more appropriate.
yeah, I don't have any problem with that.
And if somebody came up with something that was an improvement, we could always revisit this and add to it.
You could. And so that's the other thing. All of these standards and regulations, you have the ability to amend by just having a public hearing. So this is not something that you need to send off to another board. This is something that's within your jurisdiction. You schedule a public hearing, you review, and you can make changes at any time.
Requiring islands for lighting and light poles?
That's under the zoning bylaw, we're requiring islands.
We're not altering.
You're not altering the zoning bylaw. This is only for the spaces themselves. So this doesn't tell you how a parking lot should be laid out. It tells you how the parking spaces within the parking lot would be laid.
Really, the biggest impact is like what you're saying at Stagecoach and all this different.
Yeah.
This is what the space is supposed to be.
Just the spaces, yeah, not the lot itself, how it's, okay. Alright.
Is there any public thoughts, any comments from the audience?
You're here for something.
We're chipping away.
Never know what the planning board's going to do, right?
Is this something that we would make a motion on to approve?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, to adopt these as your new
This is the new
parking standards.
So I make a motion to adopt the updates to the automotive parking design standards, rules, and regulations.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
There's unanimous, so it is adopted. Moving on. Item number 5, recommendation on board appointments for regional and other town committees. So So I think it might be good to just walk through
Yeah.
the memo here and discuss each of these and see who's interested in different things. We can talk about experience you've had on them, and I guess did people get a chance, did you get a chance to look at this before?
I did look at them, but I thought it'd be a good idea too to go through each of them, because there is a good number of them to sort of divvy out.
I think also, Nora, could you clarify, like, it's not, every year, we don't just appoint a bunch of people from the planning board, it's a re-recommend to the selectmen. and
Exactly.
Some of the things overlap and.
Right, so all these appointments are Board of Selectmen appointments, but because these on this list here are related to planning activities, the Board of Selectmen always looks to the planning board for a recommendation. Most of them are annual appointments. One that is not is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. That's actually a 3-year appointment, and I believe Steve Volanoff is in his 2nd year of the 3rd year. So the selectmen will not be making a new appointment on that until 2019. But all of the others, I believe, are 1-year appointments, and you can make a recommendation. If any of the planning board members are interested in serving on these committees, the selectmen will consider that recommendation. If there are any committees that you don't have anyone who's interested or available to serve, then the selectmen will appoint someone else.
And just some, I mean, it's not news to people here, but it is good to have some continuity on these boards, and it's good to have alternates who participate.
It
because,
absolutely is. A lot of them are daytime meetings, and everyone is not always available, so your work schedule may interfere, and it's always good to have an alternate. So Housing Partnership is the first one that I think you'd be considering. That is usually evening meetings. It meets generally 3 times a year. They will be looking at a housing production plan and reviewing the housing element of the comprehensive plan over the coming year. Michael McCusker has served on that board in the past, and Brian Gorman was the alternate last year. So continuity does help. So if you're interested in keeping those roles, that would be great. And if you want to change, then.
I would definitely like to stay on that. Mike, did you want to stay on that as well?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
yes. I'm
All
the
right.
chairman.
I didn't know that.
No one else knew it either.
So no change.
So we'll recommend to the
That happened to me.
selectmen
I
to keep
showed up
the,
late for one meeting there.
keep the current
Maybe the
appointments, Michael McCusker as member and Brian Gorman as alternate.
Yes.
So the next.
I think you can make a motion at the end when you have them all.
I think we can just, I think we'll have a consensus and then just at the end. The MBTA Advisory Board, so I'm the alternate for this, and it finally met a few months ago, and then I had a bunch of things come up that I couldn't make it to. They had 3 meetings in the span of 2 months.
Now, this is usually in the morning, isn't it, in Boston?
Right, it's
Yeah.
a. different-
Wednesday morning, 10 a.m., I think.
Like 9 or 10 a.m., so it's
Steve was very consistent there.
It's half a day, and principally they talk about the budget, although we've raised some other issues and it's kind of the opportunity to be there with people from the MBTA. So Steve was good at like bringing up issues about the parking garage at 128 Station, and I think through knowing people there, it helped a little bit probably with the East Street Bridge stuff and all. So it's kind of maintaining a connection to people there. But yeah, I would be happy to. I don't necessarily want to maintain that because I found it really hard to get away for half a day.
Yeah, it's a commitment.
And Steve's appointment still goes another 2 years?
No, his
that's
appointment to
just
the
for the PC.
Metropolitan Area Planning Council is another 2 years. This is an annual appointment. So if another member of the board is interested, we can give your name to the selectmen, and if you're not, then we can suggest that they reappoint Steve.
And if nobody wants it, I will do it again. But it's not my. I was hoping for a lot more out of it, but it's hard to go.
It's hard to make it in there, and it's
2
a,
years and then have like 3 meetings and.
right. No
You know,
takers?
Is that once monthly?
No,
So
it's
sporadic.
Sporadic.
Yeah.
So literally, I want to get on the MBTA advisory board, And then nothing happened for at least 18 months and all. And then I emailed them like, do you ever meet? And then suddenly it's budget season. And so they had a meeting in February and then a couple of meetings in April, I think. So
Where do they meet?
they met
In Boston.
at the transportation building.
Federal buildings?
It's
10 Pike Plaza.
yeah, Park Plaza, right off of.
Yeah, Back Bay Station.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, I'll take that one. Someone's gotta be there. Might as well.
So
jump
how
on
are
it.
we, so when it says Steve Olenoff interested in staying, but would we be?
You can both go.
He can be, well, he.
One could be a member and one could be an alternate.
Yeah,
So Chris can be the member and
He'll show up in
Steve
the
can be the
audience.
alternate.
Steve will go anywhere if they're talking about planning something.
So no one else interested in this? Then, all right,
No.
then Chris. And you'll be the member.
Primary member.
Yeah.
Primary, yeah. Okay, the next one, Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Probably.
So Trevor was the representative and Brian was the alternate. They also meet on Wednesdays in Boston in the afternoon. A little bit easier, I think, than the morning meetings.
Yeah. So I'll stay on that.
Would you like to be the primary member?
Sure.
And would anyone like to be an alternate?
It's just too tough for me to get in there at
Mhm.
those hours.
If nobody else, I'll do it.
Thank you.
Should be more enthusiastic. But, it's like, oh, we got a
That's
plan.
actually a very important board because one of our goals for over 30 years now has been to get improvements to the 128-95 interchange. And that's what this board mainly discusses,
Saying it's not-
transportation
it's not great as
improvements.
it is.
It's a $250 million project, and although it is always at the top
It's
of the
climbing.
list of projects that they'd like to do, it's never been funded. So
It'll be more like 350 before they put a shovel in.
the intention is to keep it at the top of the list and hopefully to eventually obtain funding. Then we have the Three Rivers Interlocal Council, TRIC. It meets in Norwood, so much easier to get to. It meets monthly on Tuesday mornings from 8:30 to 10. Mike McCusker was the primary member last
I'd
year.
like to remain so.
Would
I'll
anyone
be
like
the
to
alternate. I did that for years, so I know where they meet.
Great. All right, next we have the Islington Center Task Force, and we need one member as a representative to the task force. It had been meeting on a monthly basis. I think going forward, it'll probably meet on a quarterly basis, unless we have another significant project that requires more frequent meetings. The first meeting will likely be in September, and the first item on the agenda is the town center portion, town center element of the comprehensive plan.
I'd like to take a crack at that, if nobody else is interested.
Are we doing some kind of a steering committee or something for the comprehensive plan?
That's next on the
That's
agenda.
next. Yeah, that's coming up. All right. Associate Planning Board members, Steve Rafsky's term is ending on June 30th, and Todd Sullivan's term actually expired last year,
Yeah,
and he was not available to be reconsidered for that. These are a little bit different. I'm not going to ask you to vote on them tonight. I'm going to just ask you to give it some thought. Steve Rafsky is interested in continuing. The way these associate member positions are appointed, they're appointed by a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. So what we would do is we would ask for the Planning Board members to attend a Board of Selectmen meeting and for one portion of that meeting to sit with the board and actually make the appointments. So Steve Rafsky is interested. Steve Olenoff is also interested in being an associate member. I haven't heard any interest from anyone else, but there could be other people who want to throw their names in the ring. So I'd ask you to just give it some thought and not to actually make recommendations until you sit with the
It's an
selectmen.
optional kind of thing. I mean, we're not required to have.
You're not. So it's not something that we're required to have, but it has come in handy before.
Yeah.
when there's a member or two members who can't sit on a special hearing. A special hearing requires 4 members in favor for approval. And if we run into a situation where on the hearing night we only have 3 members, then that hearing actually cannot be held.
Yeah, it's a great safety net. to have.
But how do you know in advance to set that
Usually you
up?
do, because someone will have to recuse themselves because they see it coming up and they have a personal conflict, or they know they're not going to make 2 meetings, and they're therefore essentially recusing themselves right there by their own work schedule.
It's just an insurance policy for continuity of the board.
It's not likely 2 of us are going to come down with the flu the same day. But we
It's
usually-
used more in the instance of conflict of interest than in illness. Because you can miss 1 hearing of a special permit and
Right.
still vote, but if you miss 2, you cannot. Or if you have a conflict, you cannot. So I would just recommend you just consider whether you have anyone you'd like to recommend.
Sure.
And then hold that off until we schedule a meeting with the selectmen.
And then what happens typically, as I understand, it's the chairman of the planning board who selects which associate is going to sit for what hearing.
That's right. So as chair, Dave, you would determine when an associate is needed, and then you would contact that associate through the staff to have them sit at a hearing. And you would determine which of the 2 would be needed and appropriate for whatever hearing was coming up.
Right.
All right. Next is the Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Committee. Steve Alnoff has an appointment that runs through 2020. He was not necessarily representing the planning board on that, but he was a member of the planning board that was sitting on that. So it's very helpful to have a member of the planning board if anyone is available. They meet Thursday nights once a month. So if it's something that you think you have time and interest.
Were you on that before?
So I was.
Dave was a founding member.
We found the committee, so they
Still
are-
know the
I
handshake?
think we started that in 2009 or
Yeah,
2010.
2000.
And that's a
2010.
subset of planning, it's a planning board.
So it's a subcommittee to the planning board. Its purpose is to make recommendations to the planning board and to the Board of Selectmen, where the Board of Selectmen serve as road commissioners. It's a very useful board. They've made a lot of
See,
great suggestions over the
I'm
years.
always encouraging people to get on that board, to, like, whenever there was a guy at town meeting who asked about what's the town doing, and I sent him a letter and said, you should go to the Ped Bike Committee.
And unlike many of the other boards, I don't know that this is doesn't have a firm cap on the number of members. The Board of Selectmen can increase the numbers at their discretion. So we always encourage as much interest as
Yeah, it's
Possible.
it's a very useful committee for just your own learning about what's going on, because as that committee has met for the last 10 years, things like Gay Street sidewalks, we've been talking about it for off and on. And lots of things around town. You have a meeting where the police, the DPW director, the town planner, they're all there, and so you have kind of a format where residents can raise issues they're concerned about, and then there can be a discussion that's a lot less formal than, like
Yeah.
going in front of a board or going to the town administrator. So I think it's very, I'm a big advocate for people to get on the committee. So I don't want to take anybody's place.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to be, I mean, that's something that I would feel passionate about being a part of. Is this one that we would want an alternate as well? Or is this something where if I couldn't make a meeting, I could?
So the board doesn't have any
Yeah, they don't-
any authority, so they don't need an alternate.
Okay.
I would just say I'd encourage
I would like-
anyone who's interested to attend.
Got it.
You could be the primary member, but everyone is welcome
Sure.
to attend.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we could recommend the selectmen appoint Brian to the Ped Bike Committee.
We just can't have 3 of us attend.
Right, that's true. So just to point out, we can never have more than 2 planning board members attend any meeting unless it's posted as a planning board meeting. So if Brian's planning to attend, if someone else wants to attend a meeting at the same time, 1 other person is okay, 2 is not, so just let us know. And if for some reason 3 members or more have a need to attend, we'll just post it as a planning board meeting.
Got it.
Just let us know at least 48 hours in advance. Municipal Task Force, this is another group that hasn't met in about 6 months, but was meeting consistently, right, when we were talking about the police station, the fire station, took a little bit of break to give the school committee an opportunity to move along further in their plans, and I think they'll be starting up again I don't know if they'll be meeting in the fall or not until winter, but we absolutely need a
I'm actually.
planning board
Mike is on-
representative.
I'm on it as well.
You're on it as an at-large member, and Mike is on it as
Planning board
member,
representative.
right.
I started as planning board, then I went as
Then you went as-
FinCom,
right.
At large.
Right.
At FinCom now, I'm still on it officially, but in what capacity, I guess, just at large, so.
Are
It's
you
fine.
interested in continuing?
Sure.
I think that's
It does it.
it for
All
the
right,
board,
that's-
so
So let me just make sure I've got this. So Chris is going to join the MBTA Advisory Board as our primary, and Steve would remain as the alternate, Steve Olenoff. The RTAC, the Regional Transportation Advisory Council, Brian becomes the primary, I become the alternate. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Mike remains as the primary, Chris becomes the alternate. Task Force, Mike will join the Islington Center Task Force, or we will recommend that the selectmen invite him to join, I guess. We'll talk about associate members later. We will recommend Brian Gorman to be appointed to the Pedestrian and Bike Safety Committee, and Mike McCusker to remain with the Municipal Task Force.
the one you skipped was housing partnership.
Oh, right.
That'll stay as is.
Yeah.
Mike McCusker is primary and Brian Gorman is alternate.
Right.
And so,
MAPC stays the same.
MAPC
MAPC
is
stays the
no
same.
appointment this year.
Right.
all right. That's our board appointments. So I think the next item on the agenda is review goals for 2018, 2019. And I wanted to, I think there's a great opportunity now. Now is a good time to bring up the comprehensive plan and to work out a process for revising it, rewriting it, putting, it has, the document was written in 2000. It's been, so here we are 18 years later. And there's a real need to work out some consensus in the town over what the future should be, I think. I think there are a lot of shared things, but I think that the comprehensive plan process, it's not just that we would create some document, but I think there's an opportunity to have a series of meetings, of public engagement where people get together and talk about these different aspects of the plan. And that will foster connections between the boards and the residents and community groups. And so it can be a daunting challenge, as we have a large document there with many sections to it. But I think that it's time to start that, because also we don't have any looming large development. There's no predestined purpose for this plan. This is a good time. We're in between things, I think. And when there's additional development coming to town, we could have the plan discussed in advance, so that it's not going to be in the context of a single developer or something like that. So it's a good opportunity, I think, to kick off that process. Some thoughts I've had about this are that we started this, and Nora knows more and can comment a lot about this, but the process started a while ago, like 5 years ago, probably.
Actually, it was 2010. 2010, we hired a consultant. The selectmen appointed a 28-member steering committee, hired a consultant, brought in, I believe, 40 members of subcommittees. They had a visioning session. They sent out a survey. Each of the subcommittees for the different elements of the plan began meeting. Got to the point where the public discussion was complete, and then asked their consultant to produce the data. And then after the data was produced, we were going back to those subcommittees to actually write the meat of the update. And the process dwindled throughout that time, and people lost interest and did not actually write the elements. So we suspended it and then came back again in 2013, and this time we did a little bit differently, where we used existing boards. For instance, Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Committee was called upon to write the transportation element, and they essentially wrote the full update. That was in 2013, so it needs revising, but we have the bones of it. We had a group that wrote the natural and cultural resource element. That was a subcommittee of the planning board. We have had the Islington Center Task Force recently working on the town center element. And we had an Economic Development Advisory Board back in 2013 that wrote the economic development element. So we actually have pieces to serve as drafts that would then come back to a full steering committee. But we need to restart the full public participation process. And I would recommend to you that the best way to do that is to have a consultant who facilitates the public participation but doesn't write the plan.
Right, I think in listening to the process before, what I would like to encourage us to do is for the planning board to steer this time, to not necessarily create a committee or a board or something that oversees it, but for the planning board to actually coordinate this, us having at our meetings, at other public meetings, to pull together these pieces of things and to work out a process that we're really driving it. And the components are already out there, like whatever comes out of open space, that's a component too. Ped bike, the stuff that was done for the transportation plan, but we could bring it here and then get other input as well.
Right. So
The
you
other-
would start with each of those elements as drafts, put those together and actually offer that to the public as your draft update, and then have the public process, I guess, amend that draft.
I think there's a couple of things in particular, as I've been to these, the citizen planner training collaborative meetings, I think all of us have been to some of those. They have a program where they will go on site and do a training session of town boards and whatnot. So they have one that's called Planning with Community Support. For $400, they will come and conduct like what they do at Holy Cross for all the planners and stuff. That could be a way to kick things off, I think. Another thought is that MAPC they have a lot of resources in terms of community engagement, and so not to have a consultant who writes the whole plan, but there could be services that they provide to facilitate an audience or planning what we do when we get a group of people together. I think something like that would be valuable to do.
You would need a workshop. So the comprehensive plan process that the state requires has a certain steps you have to follow for public participation, and I think it would be difficult for the planning board to run that workshop. So I do think we would need a consultant to facilitate the workshop itself, but the board to steer the process.
Right, because I think I can imagine things like, people putting Post-it notes up on boards around the room and all that, but none of us, that's not what we do. I'm not a facilitator in that way. Yeah, I think that kind of a approach would be more effective than appointing a bunch of people to a big committee again. I'd like to see us treat this as think of it like programming activities. So instead of having a series of meetings, there'd be things like, let's have a field trip to Lincoln to look at the paths behind the stone walls. For example, we were talking about Gay Street sidewalks and all, what other communities have done. We could have an event where people who are interested go to off-site to look at that. When you're talking about the economic development aspects of it, have a field trip to a neighboring town where there's some project underway that we could ask people what they think about it. Try to think of, to make this process include a lot of more active things like that versus just the sort of writing the plan or kind of going over the details.
What were some of the pitfalls? Why did it fizzle out in 12?
Part of the reason was the length of time.
How long did it take to form this in 2000?
It took 3 years.
It's
So
a big project.
yes, the comprehensive plan steering committee for the 2000 plan actually started in 1997. I remember it because it was before my first son was born, and the plan didn't actually get to town meeting until he was 3 years
So
old.
what kind of a number were we supposed to put on the shelf life of this comprehensive
So
plan? 'Cause
generally
I don't think 18 years, after all those years to
Well, see,
compile it,
that's-
18 years, I know it was getting to the end of the shelf life, but for the last 6 years, I've heard people tell me that that's outdated.
So ideally, you would start a new planning process every 7 years, or 7 years after the plan has been adopted, with the idea of having an updated plan within 10 years. So 10 years is a good life for a plan. 18 years has been too long,
Well, a
because
lot
there
happens we didn't have University Station.
Right.
And
True.
I would
So-
think the university might have been the reason too. It seems a lot of effort was put into.
So there
Well,
were so many different subcommittee meetings, so it started in 2010, was doing well through 2011, and then it went back to the consultant to actually write the plan and gather the data. And when that was ready to come back to the subcommittees, it was early 2012, and then University Station took a lot of time, so the emphasis changed. I can also say that back at the original plan, back in 2000, when that was adopted, the main issue in town was preservation of open space. That was the overwhelming desire of residents that
All the
really
subdivisions are
guided
popping
that
up.
plan. We had quite a few subdivisions, and there was, we formed the land trust to acquire land. There was also a big discussion about fields versus passive recreation, maintaining the forests versus putting in fields for sports facilities. I think since that time, we created multi-purpose fields. We put down the turf, which allowed for a much greater use. So the issues have changed a little bit. Housing was a big issue back then, but it has become so much more of an issue over time. Economic development was certainly a big issue then, but our landscape was very different than it is today. So it's still just as important to us, but we have a different structure. We're moving in the right direction where our scales are going up in commercial development as opposed to going down as they were before. So we have some of the same issues, some different ones, and it needs to go back to the public. That's always the first step in a comprehensive plan required by the
What was the
state.
most effective way to get to the public in 2000?
A visioning session and a survey. Both of those received a fair amount of response. The visioning session may have had about, I'm going to guess, about 70 people that came, but very active participants who had great ideas. Westwood Day actually came out of that. We hadn't had a Westwood Day in probably 20 years, and that reinvigorated Westwood Day. The survey was well received, but a well-received survey was probably 3% of households. Not overwhelming numbers, but that's what you can expect from something like this. Social media is far more prevalent now than it was in 2010. I think we could do better. I think we could really get the survey out to more people, and hopefully people would respond more quickly.
Well, the surveys kind of, it answers questions, but I think that these, like the Westwood Day story, that's the kind of thing that could be the fact of people getting together to talk about it, they come up with good ideas. And so, there were already people who are very interested in affordable housing now after a town meeting, because they were kind of reacting to that and saying, well, what can we do to actually create affordable housing? And I think there's some momentum and energy out there that we could make a
Tap
part of. I
into.
just don't want to kill it by being responsible for setting up lots of meetings where people sit, and listen to other people talk. And
Well,
I think that
and the purpose the last time around was that each of those subcommittees was to write their element. And I think that's where we got bogged down. People had a lot of interest in conversing about ideas, but when it actually came time to put those ideas on paper, then people dwindled and they stopped coming back. So we lost momentum. So if this time we start by writing a draft for people to react to, I think that's a lot easier to maintain interest if you're reacting to a statement on paper than trying to actually write from scratch.
I
Oh,
agree
yeah.
with that.
Well, you can just set up a field of questions from an expert
Mm-hmm.
to guide them to, so you can just get a general idea of what people want.
Right. So the survey helps direct the issues that are out there that people want to see addressed. And the visioning session gives people an opportunity to converse face to face, and that's how you get some new ideas and get traction under old ideas as well. So I think both of those are important, but we need to start with the draft. So I would suggest pulling together what the Pedestrian Bicycle Safety Committee did, what the Islington Center Task Force did, what the Housing Partnership did, get all their pieces together, actually produce a draft update for this board to look at, and when this board's comfortable with that draft, release it and start a new process.
Yeah, my fear in thinking about participation rate, Dave, I think your idea for field trips and such is great for those people that attend, but I think it can be daunting for someone to look at that and say, I have to drive to Lincoln, or I have to go, because most of them don't want to come here and talk for an hour,
Well, I
much
think
less
it's,
drive 45 minutes away to then talk about what they saw.
I think that that's part of the challenge of most people, there are a few things they're very interested in, and so how do we get them in for that? And it isn't something where you have to go to 20 meetings. It's like if all you do is go to if we have a walkability workshop and bring a few people in, and that's all they do, and then they're involved in the transportation part of the plan, that's great. And if we do housing stuff, maybe it spins off. Maybe people say, oh, I've started writing this plan, but I'm going to get appointed to or I'll get onto WAHA, and I want to work directly with that and stuff. So I think I want to find ways to get more people engaged.
Very difficult.
And I think
I
that's
mean,
with the,
Even at our town meeting had 10% of our registered voters show up.
but I think
Did
that,
we hit the 10% number?
I think
but
somewhere around
but
there.
it's a different kind of thing. Like if you have 10% of people who show up and want to do something, that's amazing, actually. I mean,
I agree.
To have 50% voting where it's just yes or no isn't really that significant, but you have 10% of people who are willing to give up 4 or 5 hours of their time for something. I think that's a lot.
And Dave, are you thinking more like to gather more ideas? Is that what you're thinking? Like, because we have the Open Space and Recreation
Right.
Committee. We did have the visioning session. I thought that the consultants did a great job managing that meeting. I thought the survey was put together well. I mean, I think we can work on the questions, because sometimes the questions aren't exact enough, or they're not going to give answers that you're looking for, or dig the way you're looking for. But it's a big document, so to get it generated and completed, I don't know what the best way to go about it.
Well, as I'm thinking about that, I like Nora's idea of coming up with something for people to respond to.
Yeah.
When people look at a blank piece of paper, they stay blank. But if they have something to read and then comment on, they're going to be far more engaging.
I agree.
So a perfect example, the most recent comprehensive plan called for reduction of setbacks on High Street and Washington Street. That was written in the plan, and that was an implementation strategy that was actually carried forth, and the zoning was changed to do that. We heard at recent Islington Center Task Force meetings residents who wanted just the opposite. They wanted buildings to be further back, and they wanted to increase the setbacks. So that's an issue where if you put it in the plan, one way or the other, you're going to get reaction. And then you'll come up with a consensus, and we'll know which way to go forward.
And who would write the initial draft that we're
I think
talking
staff would, so I think that
Okay.
would be Abby that would work on writing the draft.
We would
There's,
review it.
we need to update the demographics. The comprehensive plan is heavy in data accumulation, so that's something that she may be able to do on her own, or we may need help with that as well. But she would be able to write the draft, bring it to you, and then you would amend it, get it to the point where you felt it was ready to release to the public, and then begin your full public participation with that draft in place. The draft would really just bring the 2000 plan to 2018, but wouldn't necessarily make changes in goals. That would come out of the public process.
What do you think about the CPTC thing, or the MAPC, or those kinds of?
So I'd have to
How
look
could we
into
engage?
MAPC to see exactly what program they're offering right now. We've used them under their local assistance for different projects. We use them for the pedestrian bicycle plan that we did in coordination with Dedham, and we're actually working with them now on an economic development plan that we're doing with Dedham and Norwood, a tri-town economic development plan. So if they have the bandwidth and have a program in place, I'd be fine with that. I think we may end up engaging a private consultant for the public participation process in addition to them, but I guess we'll see how that goes. The Citizen Planner Training Program is a great program. To have them come, we would get all our boards. We did do this once before. We had invited the zoning board and the planning board and the conservation commission, but it really teaches you how to be a board member. And it does teach you how to plan, but it doesn't substitute for the public participation process. I think it helps all of our board members be better board members and helps them to be more engaged in the process, but I'm not sure it really helps public members participate in the comprehensive plan.
What about budgets for consultants and experts or
It's
whatever?
something we would need to budget for, so it's not in our current budget, but there are opportunities that we might be able to scrape some funds together.
And who actually did the writing of the 2000 plan?
We had
that
consultant Phil Hare, who wrote the plan. He was also the consultant that we engaged in 2010 to write the update. And he had started it but didn't get that far. So that was written by Phil Hare with a lot of involvement by steering committee members.
So we hired somebody.
We hired someone then. But that was a brand-new plan. That was
Right.
starting from scratch.
Right.
I don't think we need to hire someone now. In fact, I think that it would be counterproductive because you bring in an outsider. Phil is no longer available, so you bring in someone new who would have to get up to speed. I think staff can do that work. It's just bringing it from
Come up with
2000 to today.
Come up with a document for discussion, basically.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
there's
A starting point.
starting
right.
point. I like the idea of having someone that helps us throughout the process to facilitate this kind of community engagement stuff. Like, not that they're not writing the plan, but saying things like, okay, we're going to have, you should do this kind of a meeting, of a workshop, and you should have a series of workshops, and they'll be there to facilitate it. I don't know how much time that is, but I think it's not going to be free.
No, it isn't. It isn't. But it won't. So generally, a comprehensive plan, if you hired a consultant to write the whole plan, would cost you in the area of $100,000. If you're calling someone in just to do the public participation, you're really paying by the hour for their engagement process. They wouldn't be doing work outside of Westwood on the plan. They would just be coming to Westwood and working with us while they're here. So I think it would probably be closer to $20,000.
See, and I think, again, I think that the value of it is in that process, that, here's a document, okay, but, as we know, people can look at it years later and they'll say, well, I didn't see that. What are you talking about? This doesn't, the document quickly, it captures what was said, but it's that process along the way of people getting together and saying, hey, why don't we have Westwood Day? Let's have another Westwood, let's get Westwood Day started again. That's the kind of thing that will happen, I think, from having these workshops and from getting people together to talk about what are we going to do about affordable housing? What are we going to do? Do we really want economic development? It's an assumption that we do, but what does that mean? Like, let's get the people in the town center talking about what they really mean about that.
So, and that's another reason to have an outside consultant to facilitate it, because there's no preconceived notions and there's no reason to direct the discussion one way or another. They're
But I
not.
think
There's
they
no.
also recognize, okay, we're done. We got it. We're, as opposed to someone invested in this emotionally, they may want to, no, I want to keep going. I haven't heard what I want to hear yet. And that just kicks it farther down the road and nothing gets done.
They have a crazy idea, which I'm sure everyone will shoot this down, but I think you should set a really aggressive time frame to say 3 years is too long because people who came to the first meeting are probably not going to be there. But something more like, let's put something together for fall.
Fall 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can do that. So an update, not a new plan.
Not a
A new
rewrite,
plan took 3 years. An update should not take that long. So if we were shooting for fall of 2012, that would mean the plan would have to be completed by August of, 2019, not 2012. Sorry, not going back in time. It would have to be absolutely completed by August in order to make that deadline. So we'd have just over a year to
So
get
you
it done, and I think that's a possibility.
So this summer is the figure out the process, figure out what kind of combination of facilitator, what's outside engagement.
And have staff doing
Start
actual
a-
writing.
getting a draft in place, and then spend the fall, it would be the actual meeting, workshops with people on into the winter.
Right.
And getting it written up over the summer to present.
Spring of 2019 would probably be the most intense discussion. So in the fall, you'd get people together, get the ideas, and then in spring, you would be hashing out what goes in and what doesn't.
Westwood Day might be a good way to be in front of people, to sign up for this if you're interested to come meet. People are wandering around, they're signing up for everything else.
Yeah, well, just a booth to explain.
Right. That's
You
like
know,
we
the
have a town hall
process,
booth,
you
a
know.
planning board.
That
Right.
also is a good anchor to now. So we have to, what's the next steps would be to put together a budget or something, or to talk to Nora.
Right, right.
And,
We'll see what we can find as far as funds. We may have to go in the fall to request a budget amendment.
But then at Westwood Day, we could, that would be time to really tell people, here's this process that we're starting, and you got a lot of people all in one place, so you can sign up to
Yeah,
be
you can
involved.
get I'm sure Hometown Weekly, Westwood Suburban Press, whatever, would be interested in this for content. Oh, look what they're doing.
And then you have an opportunity for the following Westwood Day in 2014 to have the produced plan ready to go in 2019.
You said 2014.
Oh, 2019, sorry, I'm confused with my dates. So yeah, so this meeting, you would, this Westwood Day, you would get people engaged, and then you would show them the product at the next Westwood Day, which would be all ready to go to town meeting for endorsement,
Where they should come vote.
where they should come vote, that's right. The planning board actually has the greatest role because you adopt the plan. Endorsement is a benefit, because by bringing it to town meeting for endorsement, you get people's buy-in, and so they understand what the plan is. They actually read it, and they look for it, and they know that in future zoning discussions that they should be consistent with the comprehensive plan. But it's the planning board's adoption that makes the plan
How was
valid.
this, what was it, do you know what this was, how it was adopted? Like, how, was it
Yeah.
just like?
So it
unanimous?
came to the planning board, it was unanimously adopted by the, first you had the steering committee, and I believe the steering committee, for that plan was close to 40 members as well. They all were unanimously in support. There was a lot of discussion leading up to that, especially with the fields crew versus the forest crew. That was a very heated discussion. But in the end, it was a unanimously supported plan, went to the planning board, was unanimously adopted, and then it went to the town meeting for endorsement. I can't actually remember what the vote was on the endorsement, but it may have been unanimous, or it was at least highly favorable. I don't remember if there were any nays.
Well, I'm okay with the process that we're talking about here, where staff would start working on it. And,
So do we want to have maybe like a subcommittee or something, if anybody's particularly interested in working with staff? And as I was thinking before, we always have that issue of you can't all meet
You
out.
can't all meet to discuss it, that's right.
But we have had subcommittees before.
So what Abby can do is she can write a draft of an element, send it out to all of the board members. You can send it back to Abby to incorporate your thoughts in it. What she can't do is send it to you again.
Yeah, and actually, I know I was thinking about some of these other committees, we've done a lot of that. It's just it's just like with the materials for these meetings. You know, she sends out the materials, people can send their questions back to her. We don't send each other questions.
Right.
But
And then she can react to that and present something to you at a formal meeting.
I'd like to keep the process going.
But you can have working meetings with 2 members.
You could have 2 members at a working meeting,
Yeah.
right? Anything
We did
beyond
that
that
with
has
the-
to be a
the
posted
senior
meeting.
When we moved senior
Yes.
housing to OSRD.
To OSRD, we did that then, that's true. So I would recommend that you also make it a standing item on your agenda for an update on the comprehensive plan.
Well, if we were going to make a subcommittee, I would be interested in being on it, if working with staff to kick off this with whoever else is interested. Otherwise, it's just me and not a subcommittee.
Who else is interested? Anybody?
When are the meetings held?
Haven't gotten that far.
Whenever you're available.
Probably during the day.
Yeah,
That would probably be,
yeah, because you're meeting with staff. And really, that's it.
yeah. But it's pretty flexible during normal business hours. I suppose they could also be, if they're evenings, they could be early evenings on Tuesdays when the planning board doesn't meet, because Abby could be here until 7 o'clock on those nights.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot like the way, I mean, individually, like we can go, I've met with our housing person to learned a lot about affordable housing from just talking to Sarah, and I think that it'd be valuable for board members here, for people to go just sit down with Nora and Abby and just hash out some of these, because it's hard for all of us in a meeting like this to do it. And I can, if someone else wants to, I could say Chris and someone else, and then I'll just talk to Abby, because I have a lot of interest in this, but I don't want to, I think we've got to get everybody engaged, so.
I mean, I can give it a stab, but my days are kind of tight. So if we can work something out, I'd be happy to do it.
How many sections are in this comprehensive plan?
If you go to the table of contents, it shows you all the different elements in the
I mean,
front.
there's quite a few, but
Yeah,
I'm just
there are a
wondering
few,
if
and we're
there's.
actually adding another. So if you look right here, these
Right.
are all the different elements: housing, transportation,
1, 2, 3, 4,
economic
5, 6,
development.
7, 8. 8.
And then
do it
we're adding
tomorrow.
another one on
So 9.
climate change and sustainability. That's going to be a new element that'll be
This
in
may
this
be
year's.
farther down the road, but I'm saying there's 5 of us. Maybe we each get, 2. And we kind of, maybe they're related, maybe they're not, I don't know. But you quarterback those 2,
Yeah.
and you meet with whatever throughout the year, you figure it out. If this is our thing, then we kind of have to own it.
I was kind of
you know.
thinking, yeah, like we could, instead of having sort of, here's the committee, it'll be like, okay, between now and the next meeting, we need to figure out a proposal for a process. We need to work out the details. And so there's a couple of people to work with, Abby and Nora and whoever else, to come back at the next planning board meeting and say, here's what we found, here's the plan. After that, it breaks up into pieces, and let's say that, it could be that Brian and I are really interested in housing, and maybe Debbie and Chris are interested in economic development, and Mike and I are interested in transportation. But, we could, it doesn't have to be that it's one, 2 people who are just the
Doing it all.
plan
Right.
subcommittee, but we'll just like make.
That's what I mean. I think if we break it up into a manageable amount
So how
of
about
work.
between now and your next meeting, you think about what elements in the plan you're most interested in helping draft?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we can still do some kind of subcommittee to really get
Get the
things
process
going.
in place.
Right. Yeah.
So I would, if you're interested, Debbie, then what I would like to have is, I want to answer to the question of how do we get people really engaged so that this stuff is, we get people's real opinions on this. Like, how do we design a process that really is inclusive?
I think open space and recreation, that's a pretty engaged, they had a lot of energy behind it.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would like to look into is thinking outside the box of who are we missing? Because there's always residents in town who are always engaged, and then for open space and recreation, you might have individuals who are interested in like sporting fields or kind of like what you were dealing with back when this was conceived.
Right.
The fields
Open space
yeah.
versus fields, yeah.
So I think we have a recent experience of really engaged residents, which is good.
I think we could also do well to talk to our neighbors. I'm sure there's, I think Walpole just did theirs, didn't they?
They might have.
I was talking to someone at their town. They've done this. They've done research, or outreach, I should say, far more recent than 2000, that we could, hey, what did you do here? How are you using social media? Because we have no answer for that, because we've never done it, other than the survey. So I think that might be, and you go to TRIC meetings, you might have a conversation with someone from Sharon. Or, that might be the best option is TRIC, because it's all the local Three Rivers.
I think once you get this idea that we're comprehensively planning, and then everything we do, there's kind of an aspect to that. It's sort of every, you go to these meetings, you're like, what are other towns doing? You go to, we get the Conservation Commission to start thinking about this too. Like, get everybody, every opportunity to engage with a group. We'll just keep it as a standing agenda item. We won't spend hours talking about it at every
Yeah, no.
planning board meeting, but we'll keep it alive as we move through.
With a goal of 2019, it sounds like we
I
could.
think so. I think
November
that's
of
doable.
19.
Well, go to town meeting then, but that means having the plan finished by
Right,
August.
right.
August of 2019. So you'd
Is
have
there
just,
any way we can have
just
the
about a
survey
year,
done by Westwood Day? We could hand out the survey at
Right.
Westwood Day.
right? That's doable. You could do that. You're just trying to figure out what questions you want to ask. You can do that. You're not looking for the answers yet. You're just looking for the
Do
questions.
you guys have any suggestions or anything you want to say, since you're sitting
You've been hearing,
hearing all this?
I'm not sure how much you can listen to, it's been,
No, I think we came here specifically on this topic, wanted to hear the conversation.
Oh.
And so, I think identifying the goal of a date is important. The other thing I would consider is identifying the goals of the initiative, right, not just a date, right? And one of the things that comes to mind, because of the most recent discussions around Islington, is how do we take what in this, I'll say this is my opinion, but what I saw is a lot of mistrust and anger, and how do we change that into real positive input, right? Not everyone's gonna get what they wanna get, right? But we have to kind of change it idea that there's underhanded stuff going on all the time, right? And I think this needs to be a component of like the way Dave described it, is how we go about these actions. It should change that energy to the positive. Because
But I think-
20 years and, you know, we don't believe that anyone is out to, what we see is people are really invested in doing the right thing for the town.
And as always, you're gonna have difference of opinion as to what the best pursuit of that ultimate goal is. And I hear you, I've been, hearing people think that there's backroom dealings going on with this board. And I don't talk to anybody, outside of these meetings. But I think the Islington Center Task Force did a great thing in trying to reach out, but there were so many people who wanted to be a part even more, that when things with the task force went a different way than what they thought, what's going on behind our backs? When nothing was going on behind their backs, but you can't have 200 people on a task force because nothing gets done. So it's a difficult balance to do outreach and then try to get work done. It can be difficult. And then those 50 people who didn't get, feel like they weren't heard, they're heard, they just went a different way. And they've had a different opinion as to how to achieve that goal for what's best for the town. It's tough. It's a tough thing to do because you're looking for participation, but at the same time, you can't have everyone sitting at the table. No table's big enough to have that much input
Well,
and still be productive.
And with this, I mean, if we write a document and get it approved by one vote, it's like, what's the point of that? It's more about having the conversations and having people talking about this and saying, oh, we want to have economic development, and the way we want to do that is to have a mixture of residential and commercial, and it's going to bring more people to the centers of town, and that's a good thing. And then someone else can say, wait a minute, I don't want that. And that's the conversation.
Where the hard part is, what you just read is purposely vague. We want a mixture. What's the mixture? What's the ratio? I want that answer now. We can't give you that answer now because we don't have an application in front of us. We don't know what that necessarily is going to be. Things evolve. And that's the hard part for a lot of people to grasp is we're drafting a constitution. We're not drafting a specific thing for this neighborhood, a specific plan like Disney does. They come up with this is what we're doing on this plot of land. That's not what we're doing.
Because we don't control, we can have the plan is like a vision, but we
Right.
don't
It's a
control.
It's a guiding
Right,
document.
but the hard part is getting others who you reach out to understand, this is a guiding document.
not a
It's
law.
not a formulaic
Yeah.
approach to planning for our town. That's not what we're trying to achieve, and we need to get that across to people. This is a guiding document. It's not something set in stone. It's the feelings of the town at this moment. This is just generally what we want. Open space, maybe not as recreation is, but preserving open space was huge 18 years ago.
I still
We've
think
preserved
it's
it.
gonna be big.
It is big, but we've preserved a lot. So we've accomplished that. We've also brought in University Station, so economic development, it's a different landscape now than it was 18 years ago. So that's what this document is going to do, is reflect the changes in our town in the last 18 years and move us forward with a forward-thinking of what we want this town to end up looking like. We can't say Stagecoach Plaza should be painted all white. You can't be something that specific. It just has to be a guiding document. And that when you said we want a mixture, I understand what that means, but I think there's a lot of people that especially with the Islington discussion that went on, they want more concrete. They think this is a zoning document.
Yeah, it's
And
not going to be there.
Yeah, I know, and I think that needs to be impressed upon people, that we're not talking about specifics here. We're talking about general movement of our town and what we want.
Yes.
And maybe, I don't want to misrepresent, these are my thoughts as we're talking.
I understand how in a mixed-use development, supposedly the residents are supposed to give business to the commercial underneath, but it also depends on what kind of commercial you're bringing in. It really does, like that new development on Washington Street. you have a pediatric dentist and you have
Chiropractor.
physical therapy chiropractor. I mean, really, how many of those 12 units are going
But that's
to
up to the developer.
Using that space?
We can't specify what gets rented out there. That's
I
up to the
understand.
developer, and it's in his best interest for it to be diversified and for him to keep it full. So, it's in his best interest to do what we want, to what we want.
Well, but on the other hand, he gets a long-term lease with a business, like a dentist, a physical therapy place,
Mhm.
a bank,
Yep.
a lawyer's office, a real estate office.
Right.
You-
But that's kind of the free market
Right,
economy.
that's
That's
free
just how
market.
it works.
But that's what the residents were looking for, more concrete.
As I understood, he didn't have a list of, like New England Development for University Station, they had a list of retailers they worked with. They kind of knew who they had, not for everything, they obviously took a while to fill them, but it's just not how that business is done, as much as we want it to be. It's just, like I said, it's not Disney. They don't have it all mapped out that this is going to be where we sell the candy to the kids, and this is where we're going to do this. Because he didn't have that. Maybe he just wasn't sophisticated enough as a developer. I don't know. But he bought the land and that's what he wanted. So that's,
But that's, it's too bad.
it can be disappointing.
That's what's
Yeah.
gonna make it vibrant, depending on what commercial
Yeah,
use is
and-
going.
Absolutely.
Al and I walked to.
But it's in his best interest for it to be
Birdies.
vibrant.
I mean,
He wants it to be vibrant. He wants everything to fall into place and everything work and the right candy stores there and the right restaurants there and the ice cream place does well. That's what he wants. It's in everybody's best interest that it goes that way. So,
So speaking about the comprehensive plan process, one thing that we have an ability to do now that we didn't either in 2000 or in 2010 when this was done last was take much greater advantage of social media. So we could put out a survey, and I think we should put out a survey, and that captures a moment in time and gets a broad group of people. But then we have an opportunity to establish some type of an ongoing communication forum where people can constantly ask questions and receive answers. And that's what I think this board needs to think about, how we do that, so that people feel engaged on their own schedule. They don't have to invest time in
well,
coming
we
to
can create
meetings.
a page on
When
all
they have
the
a thought,
different
they can
media
send it in.
platforms just for the specific idea.
Yeah,
And so they
something.
can come right to the Westwood Comprehensive Plan
Right.
rework.
Ask their questions, send in their ideas,
Exactly.
and make sure that they
24/7.
know they're heard.
Whenever they're ready, they can come
Yeah, I
in with
think,
questions.
I mean, I had a bunch of ideas about just what the planning board could be doing, not us so much individually, but like there are other towns, like Framingham has a Facebook page that's very active. And there are lots of different things. There's Instagram, so take pictures of the things that are happening around town, the development, the natural resources. That's kind of, Instagram would be a good way to put that out there. And then there's Facebook and there's Twitter and all these different things. So I do think there's an opportunity for this to be more engaged through those channels. I mean, like I've done on my page as an individual, I think that's the kind of thing we could
And then
do.
maybe in your time that you set aside at every meeting to discuss the comprehensive plan, you actually would bring in whatever occurred in that social forum and discuss it at your board
Update it.
meeting. Right, and give answers to questions and then send the information back out. So I think having a regular agenda item, so people who do want to come here and speak to you personally can do that, but those who can't, or the timing doesn't work, or they have a thought now and just want to get it out, they have their opportunity as well.
All right, so we have a few other things we need to get to. There's so are you interested in being appointed to this committee to talk to Abby and?
Well, I thought we were gonna break it down into
I
subcommittees.
think that's later.
Yes, but
That's
later.
later,
later
okay.
on.
First it's a process subcommittee.
Okay.
Just kind of what do you think the process ought to be? It'll be things like that we need to get money to pay for whether we want to do this training thing, what type of training, or whether we want to just go directly to see what MAPC offers or what kind of, and come back to the next planning board meeting and say, this is what you all came up with. So that's what I'll appoint Debbie and Chris to a planning to plan subcommittee.
party planners.
Yeah. Streamers.
And yeah, I think it'll be, as we move along, we'll appoint different people, or we'll just go to these things. And I think every meeting that happens on this should be a public meeting. I don't know, it's more to it, just for open meeting law stuff, you also have to take notes and all, right? I mean, it's, one way to avoid the problem of having too many people show up, would just, every meeting should be a public meeting. And then if 3 planning board members show up, that's fine. We're not, we wouldn't be transacting business or,
Right.
hearing.
We can post it, but I think for minutes, because it would become too burdensome, I think the minutes would be very, very brief. You discussed this topic.
Yeah, yeah,
There's no voting
Right.
that's going on, so there's no official action by the subcommittee. So I think it would just be very brief
And we can always
agenda,
do
very brief
the
minutes.
sort of the one-way communication thing of like, if you have an idea, send it to Abby, and Abby will collect these ideas and tell everybody else what's going on, so.
Good.
All right, are there other, I'll go back to our,
Let's see.
I think that's our biggest goal there, would be to have
That's great.
a comprehensive plan to take to the November 2019 town meeting, which is a revision of this.
And a revision of the open space and recreation plan? Or is
So
that
the
all
open
gonna be
space and
incorporated?
recreation plan is on schedule for this fall. So we're hoping to bring that to this fall town meeting, if there is a fall town meeting. If there's not, it'll go to the spring one.
Okay, so they're gonna be taking as 2 separate entities.
They are. So the open space and recreation plan has to be a precursor to the comprehensive plan, because we need to have that in place in order to adopt a comprehensive plan. It feeds into the services and facilities section, and it feeds into the natural and cultural resources.
It was included in the original comprehensive plan.
It was, yeah. So, and that hasn't been updated since 2000 either, so
Okay.
we're working on that first. We'll get that back to this planning board probably in August or September.
So
Get
do
you
we
to
have set
adopt
up
it
a
and send it
working
to
group for
town
this?
meeting. For the open space one?
Yes.
No. We have representatives of the planning board are on the
Right.
comprehensive, the open space task force, so that exists already.
Okay.
Okay, the other business, we have minutes.
Yes.
Meeting minutes from May 15th are included in your,
Fine.
gonna move to approve.
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from May 15th, 2018.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And the minutes are approved.
Might have had some,
Are there any, does anyone want to abstain from approving?
I do.
Okay.
I will, since I wasn't here at the meeting. I wasn't on the board.
Let's see. We've already reviewed the meeting schedule. We have that.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks for
Take care,
coming.
good night.
Various committee reports. Do we have any? I was not at the MAPC meeting, but Steve was elected to the executive council.
He
right?
was, yes. That's great for Westwood. That's a
Absolutely.
really good position to be in.
Yeah. That's great. Trick, we meet next week. Housing, we haven't met. in a
Right, so,
Back from
yes, she's
maternity
coming back from
Coming
maternity.
back
Sarah
soon.
will be back the end of June. And I expect there'll probably be a meeting possibly in August. It'll all depend on availabilities. If not August, September.
Okay. Does it for me.
Any other miscellaneous updates you can read about? The farmer's market.
Farmers Market open today. I brought you all cupcakes from our newest vendor, Melt in Your Mouth.
Oh, yeah?
Custom cakes and cupcakes, all natural.
Yeah, I
No
went,
food
all the
coloring.
vendors are great.
Yeah, they are, aren't they? They're great. So it's on Tuesdays, and it's now at a new location in front of Town Hall Police Station, where we're building a new plaza. We have 2 produce vendors, 2 farms, Sylvia Farm and Oakdale Farms, and we have Great Harvest Grains Bread Bakery. They also bring cookies. We have this Melt in Your Mouth cake and cupcake producer, and we have Get Stuffed cookies, and a new vendor, a Colombian coffee importer as well. They weren't there
Next week.
today, but they'll be there next Tuesday. Tuesdays from 1 to 6.
Were they
So I
at the
encourage
police
everyone to
station
come.
today?
They were right in front of Town Hall. So the police station lawn wasn't finished in time. So they're in front of Town Hall for 2 weeks, and then we'll move them onto the lawn in front of
Actually a good spot for
the police
today, too.
station. It's very visible. It's got plenty of parking, so I think it's going to work well.
That just reminds me of, it's not in Westwood technically, but the Powasset Farm Community Support Agriculture, they have a few shares left if anyone is interested in doing that. We signed up for that.
It's a
Today was
great
pickup
program.
day. And they have a fruit share too, and it's really nice. We were members of that like 10 years ago when it was the very first one, and now it's really grown. It's impressive. Let's see, other items. Starbucks on High Street, parking problems. We've never had that happen in town.
So Starbucks has had ongoing parking issues for a long time. They're just a victim of their own success. They're very busy. Mornings are outrageous, and their parking lot, just the way the building is sited on the lot, it just doesn't facilitate good circulation. So Abby received a complaint from a resident about the parking plan, and she looked into it and discovered that the owners came to the planning board in 2004 to revise their parking plan. The planning board did not like the revised plan, told them to leave it the way it was, actually to reinstitute it. What happened, I believe, is that they changed the parking plan without planning board approval, came to the planning board for retroactive approval. The planning board denied that and told them to revert to their old parking plan. In the meantime, I believe they went to the Zoning Board of Appeals. She's doing some more research on that. But it's still not working. So even if they did get the full zoning approval that they needed in 2005, it's just not working. So she's going to invite them to come back in and talk to the planning board and see if there's something they can do to improve the situation. I don't know what that will be. The owners are willing to work with us and look at the lot and see if there are small changes that can be made that will just make it better. There's a bottleneck right now, so you have cars that are trying to come in the front, and the cars in the back can't get out, so new cars can't get into the spaces.
And Montessori drop off, too.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, it's next door?
Montessori's on the next
That's right,
lot,
yeah,
but
right.
There's an
Right,
eye
it's
doctor over there, isn't
Yeah, it's Medfield Ag.
Eye Doctor and Montessori is on the next lot. This is
there?
a
They should buy that building, turn it into a parking lot.
Can they get around the other
So
side?
there was discussion of that back in 2005, if they could connect the two lots and
Sure.
improve the circulation for both of them. That probably is the best alternative. Whether it's physically possible or not, I don't know. So there's a grade
Is
change,
there
but
any land in between the gas station and there?
I don't think so, no.
It's probably wet.
The town owns land behind the gas
I don't think
station,
anything's
but
wet.
No,
Oh, yeah.
but there's trees.
way back
It's-
there
There's
is,
trees,
yeah.
yeah, but I don't think anything's wet back there.
So Salvatore's Capital owns the property, and they're working with Abby to see what they can do. So she's researching it, they're looking through their old plans and seeing what the options are. But they'll be back to you sometime in the future, but we just wanted to bring it up because it was a complaint from a resident, and we do intend to do whatever we can to address it.
Let's see, the next item is Gay Street Sidewalk meeting. So I attended that meeting, the Gay Street Sidewalk update. It's a 30% design review meeting, and they presented a couple of options. Now they've studied the full detail of what would be involved in a sidewalk on either side, and the consultants are recommending as the preferred option to have a sidewalk all on the north side of the street. So that would basically run from Deerfield to Pine Lane, all on the same side of the street. And that also has the least impact on stone walls, I believe. And on-
Hanlon to
And on
Hanlon.
utility poles. Yeah, so basically you would be able, if
So
you
the
had.
Fox Hill side of this,
Oh,
of Gay
interesting,
Street.
okay,
Yeah, the Fox Hill
you're
side.
right.
So you have a
Hamlin already
cont-
has a sidewalk in front of it.
Yeah, you're right.
All the way up to
Up to a stone.
Pine Lane, up to Pine Lane, it has a sidewalk.
So instead of using the other option was to start at Buckboard and go up to Thatcher and then
Yes,
cross.
cross.
Right,
Yeah.
It's a few crossings.
It's also recommending narrowing the travel lane to a 10-foot travel lane instead of 11.
That's tight as it is right now.
What is the current one? I didn't see that in the,
The lanes are 11
They're
feet
11
wide now.
That's the distance between the white line and the yellow line. So they would, by bringing it in to 10, you move the white line over, you have a 2-foot shoulder on both sides, and you would have a 5-foot sidewalk on there. Another thing that came up at this meeting there was discussion of having a path behind the stone wall. So instead of having to move the stone wall, what if you could have the walkway behind the wall, which would be on people's property? And so this has been, people have been trepidatious about even suggesting this because of people, property rights concerns and everything. But there was some discussion of that. People liked the idea. People who didn't own the property liked the idea of that because it's aesthetically it would be better than a sidewalk, and it's much safer. A separated pathway, kids could walk behind the wall all the way to the library from Hanlon. So it was.
But the homeowners aren't.
But it would require.
The town would be inviting people onto other people's property
Property, yeah.
by bringing a sidewalk onto their yard.
I mean, it would require a very, a
you
lot
need
of
a tape.
conversations.
It would either be by easement or by taking. And there are other communities
by
that have
eas-
done this, and they've been
right.
very successful. So it's all a question of how it could be designed. There's also a hybrid option that actually moves the walls.
That's the
So
other-
that the sidewalk goes behind the wall, but the wall actually moves closer to the street. That's clearly a more expensive option from the construction end of it, but could end up being less expensive than some takings.
So
It would
there
look
were,
better.
So this was all, there's a lot more to discuss, I guess, and that was, I think people asked the question, the next step would be like 70%, but there's a lot of, there's 50% in between, so I don't know what exactly the next, they'll continue this.
Is Todd
Right,
doing
so
this?
Todd is, Public Works has contracted with an engineering firm that is producing the plans. So they produce 30% plans for both options, for the north side of the street or crossing from south to north. After the public meeting, they indicated that the priority of those two is to go with the north and bring that forward to 70% plan. So that means taking a look at what they've looked at so far is just right-of-way. Now that means going back in and identifying more of the features that would need to be disturbed and identifying the cost of takings where takings are necessary, identifying where easements would be required. So it's just going into it in greater detail.
And are the walls going to look like old town walls? Like, did they mention any of this?
Most of the walls would remain where they are, wouldn't be affected, but there were certain sections, and I'm trying to remember now, with the option they were looking at, I think it was about 900 feet of wall that needed to be relocated or renovated.
In total, or one stretch of 900?
No,
feet?
in total, so
Okay.
pieces of it. And they would be replicated in kind, so the new walls would look just like the old walls. So if it's a dry stone wall, it would be a dry stone wall.
They have the minimum impact is 600.
600, okay.
So there's some pretty obvious places where, on the north side, where there's a telephone pole that's about 6 inches from the asphalt and a stone wall about 12 inches from the telephone pole. So that's but that's right at, right on that hill, like Gay Farm Way, and then kind of in that area. But I mean, you're gonna have to rearrange things.
And if they go with the option where you go behind the walls, the biggest challenge is on the north side directly across from Milk Street, where you get a very big dip.
Yeah, you need a bridge.
Well, that's a
there.
You
drop
probably
off
would
there,
need
yeah.
a,
There's a-
you
there's
probably
a
would need a
brook that goes
pedestrian
under the road.
bridge.
That's
Yes.
Purgatory Brook goes through there, yeah.
So then the question will be
Somebody's friend.
whether the town thinks it's worth spending that much more money to get the more aesthetic and higher safety value option, or whether they would prefer to spend less money and get the sidewalk on the road. So that's a discussion that will come at the next step, but they will design to that point and then have another public meeting.
So
Was
the last time this was discussed, they talked about money to facilitate this design, right?
Right.
30%
So the presumption at the meeting was, you don't design something you don't intend to build. But is it possible we get to that point where we don't have buy-in from?
Yes, it's
like, the
possible that,
community
so
or
it's
the
possible,
neighbors?
when they get to 70%, they actually have a ballpark estimate of what it will cost, and they can actually put a proposal to town meeting saying, this is what it will look like, this is what it will cost, and then find out if there's support.
And what was the number for the design that we're spending? I forget what they asked for.
Probably about 2 million, I don't remember exactly.
No, for the design, I think that was
30%?
a couple $100,000, wasn't
I
it?
can't remember what they.
I
think
thought
it
it
was
was,
a-
yeah, 600,000
I
maybe?
thought it was half the school design.
What?
I don't remember.
For the-
So the
just for the
school, right,
design.
it was the school that was over $1.5 million, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it was less than
so
that.
you-
So
you
maybe
give us
250,000.
50%
For the school.
I'm just wondering, like, are we going to go through all this? and-
So you
to
would, yes,
have-
you will go through, we'll complete the design with the funds that were appropriated
Okay.
for it. And if it's not something that the town is ready to build now, you can still put the plans aside and build it later
You
if
have
the
to go
support
back
that
to
comes
town
down the line.
meeting,
For
possibly in the
funding for
fall.
the, for
The
the,
build?
So
right.
we're at 30% now. We can ramp up to 70% with the same funds and then go before town?
there are sufficient funds to take it to 100% design,
100%.
yes.
We
So,
have
but
the
there will
money
be
to-
another
We have the money to
meeting.
draw it.
Yeah, you'll have a.
If, then they have to go to the town to say, this is what we want to build.
So there'll
this
be
much.
another meeting
Right,
at
right.
70% to review what we have and to discuss estimates and decide if it's worth
It needs to-
moving in that direction or if it needs to change.
That's kind of the point there is you don't want to design something that nobody wants, so that would be a problem. But let's say that they design it and people are like, they believe that there's enough support that it could work this way and they like it, okay, and then the price tag could be. I don't even wanna-
Astronomical.
I don't want to put that out there, but, so now you have you have a plan and you have a price tag, and so then you say, okay, can we get grant funding for this? Can we get $1 million grant from here? Can we get the complete streets money to cover this portion of it? Can we get private donations? But you now have a target, you have something to go after. It wouldn't just be going to town meeting and saying, we need
Yeah, we
$10
need
million
X amount of
to
dollars to get
bulldoze
it
your
done.
yard.
Right.
Right.
Is it a 2/3 because it's financial?
Financial, if it's bonding, it's 2/3. If it's just
Get other
supported by
people
budget,
involved.
I'm not sure it is, but if it's bonding, it's
To get to
2/3.
that point.
Did we receive more material than just this PowerPoint? There must,
I haven't seen anything more than that. There was the PowerPoint, and there actually is a physical set of 30% plans.
okay.
I don't know if that's posted on the
Was
Public
it in our,
Works
was that in our
website or not.
packet? I just have the
think it's-
PowerPoint.
There's a link here.
There's a link.
Okay.
They're not, I don't think this is the detailed architectural plans. It's the PowerPoint that shows just where the
Okay.
green and yellow and stuff, but they had.
There are plans. They had them out on a table, and I know the Public Works Department has them. I just don't know if they've posted them to a link yet.
What's the benefit from moving it from 11 to 10?
To get more room for the sidewalk without greatly impacting neighbors.
You also
And
get,
to slow down the
So it affects where
traffic.
the sidewalk will go.
It does,
Remove
and
it.
it's
Okay.
traffic calming as well.
it's a road diet. It's like by
Yep.
making it narrower. It doesn't, people raise that, they're like, well, a truck is 10 feet wide, what the heck? But you got the 2-foot shoulder on there also, so it's
Landscaping truck.
perception.
Yeah, hopefully it would knock down the truck traffic on Gay Street.
I don't think that's going to happen.
So that's Gay Street sidewalk. Other exciting,
That's the only way to get there.
I had great ideas that we're going to make I want the meetings to move at a pace that allows us to get home, but it's not even 9 o'clock, so these are all interesting things we should go over. So the East Street Bridge is underway, and I guess it's on schedule.
It's fully on schedule, so, it's mostly weekend work, and it's according to the schedule that they released in January. It's supposed to be finished next year, 2019. The majority of work will be done by the end of this fall, but there may be a need to come back for final landscaping and final pavement in the spring,
So it'll be done before 128?
well before 128.
All right, townwide crosswalk evaluation. I think we've talked about that before, but do you have any updates on that?
I don't have anything new on that.
I think, from what I read, it just talked about, it was that memo from Beta.
Yeah, they're going to look
So-
at all our sidewalks and see what kind of compliance we are with ADA and are they properly constructed and.
So are they funded to look at this? Because it looked like there was
Was it-
chart,
It was the estimate. They estimated like
Yeah.
$63,000 or something like
Yeah.
that. So I think it was their bid.
that looked
But I
like,
think
We put it out to bid.
it was a memo of understanding, I think, like that was the bid, and then we accepted it. I think.
Oh, I didn't know that that had been done.
So I think it's to study everything, and they're ranked and sort of stratified into the ones that are near schools or higher priority, I guess, to look at.
And that's something the Pedestrian Bicycle Safety Committee tried to do on its own maybe 10 years ago. We tried to establish a database and look at, more look at intersections than not look at every crosswalk, but start to make a list of where the problems were. And this will look at everything. It'll look at every crosswalk in town. It'll look at the lighting. It'll look at the visibility from vegetation.
Does MAPC have some of that data we could grab?
Sure they do.
Probably. So I think the firm that's looking at this has access to everything they need.
So at least it's moving forward.
Yeah, and if they can prioritize, and then it'll be hopefully things like, here is the best place to do a push-button activated light or a bump out, or here it's feasible to do a bump out here, and that kind of thing, kind of identifying where.
And they may identify some crosswalks that should simply be removed.
Right, because another aspect of this, is that some of our crosswalks just shouldn't be there, because they are, people want a crosswalk because it's, well, if you're not the one walking through it, we need a crosswalk, okay, but as you know, it's just
Gives a
paint.
false sense of security.
Yeah.
So that's townwide crosswalk. Community trails.
So community trails, there was a program that was approved. It's been funded now. That's working with Hale Reservation. That's something Steve Elnoff brokered with Hale Reservation. I think it's $10,000 a year, where they will handle the scheduling, maintenance, and programming of trails in town. Pilot program.
And then I'd skipped over, so Ped Bike Committee, speed limit. So this came up at a couple meetings ago. First of all, the idea that asking selectmen to establish an official speed limit on University Ave, because there is no speed limit there.
So on that one, on the speed limit on University Avenue, that was discussed when the project was in process, and they decided that they needed to wait until everything was complete. Del Frisco's was really the last of the original proposal that was built, and now we have Brigham and Women's that should be open by September, late September, early October. They'll give some more feel to the traffic there. The reason they didn't want to establish the speed limit too soon was that the speed limit is established at the 80% median speed of traffic. And if there wasn't heavy enough traffic, cars would be going too fast, and the speed limit would be higher than we wanted it. So we're trying to get to that sweet spot where most construction is done and most of the heavy traffic is in place, and then we'll end up with a lower median speed that we can set as our.
That's another one of those
Our speed
things
limit.
that's not obvious to, like, it's like, can we make Gay Street be 25 miles an hour? It's like, no, you have to do a study, and you find out that the cars are going 50 miles an hour.
Right, it's going to raise the speed limit to 45 instead of lowering it
We
to
tried to
30.
do that on Everett Street, and we had a community meeting, and Mike Gillette came and he said, the tail wags the dog
Right,
here.
you don't want to do that.
It's not common sense. They will figure out, as long as there's no massive accidents going on, they'll figure out the speed, and they'll go on that.
So there is,
He said, okay, we're good, we'll shut up.
there is a state law, an option that this is something that was also discussed, the default speed limit idea.
Of 25 miles an hour,
So-
where not otherwise posted. So when
That's
there was
another
a,
reason for getting the places posted that, you figure can't possibly be 25.
so when there was a recent push, I think it was maybe back in January or February by the state for towns to consider that, and I did submit a request to our public safety officer, Paul Sicard. He was actually opposed to Westwood adopting that. The way, when a town adopts it, they put signs at their entrances to the town saying that it's 25 miles an hour unless otherwise posted, and that gives you the ability then to actually write speeding tickets, or at least warnings, to slow people down if they're going more than 25 miles an hour, but he just didn't think it was feasible. So it's something that I think that if this board wants to pursue it, we send another request, and maybe we invite Officer Sicard, Sergeant Sicard,
Wouldn't that
to converse with you and tell you what it is that would work and what wouldn't.
Side street?
It would reduce every side street to
Well-
25 miles an hour. Some of them probably
Some of
can't
those-
handle 25 miles an
Exactly,
hour.
that's my point,
Yeah.
exactly. It
Right.
basically gives them free rein to do 25 miles an hour on a road that may not be.
Right. Right
safe
now,
enough to
it's
travel that speed.
up to the police officer to determine if you're going at an unsafe speed. So I think there are pros and cons. I know other towns have adopted it. I think there's further discussion needed, and if this board's interested in pursuing that, then we can invite Sergeant Sicard to come talk to the board about what would be involved. It would eventually be the selectmen that would be, as road commissioners, that would be responsible for making that decision.
So I know that Dedham adopted this at the last.
did,
thing.
yes.
I think Walpole had it on their town meeting. I don't know if they adopted it. I think Needham, the number of towns. So
There
when
was a
this
big
first came
push
up,
over the winter for towns to take this into consideration.
I don't see any downside to it. I don't. And I think if you're coming into the town and you see that 25-mile-an-hour posting, it's sort of a reminder. I don't know what the anecdotal data are for it, but I don't see a downside to it.
So
I
go
think
to,
it'd be good to have, if Officer Sicard has already indicated he's against it as a member of our police force,
Have them come in.
as a safety, officer, if we owe it to the town for us to listen to him and hear both
Absolutely.
sides. On the face of it, I agree, Brian, don't see any downside, but he obviously does, and he writes tickets, so, I'm happy to listen to him.
Yeah, so
See
maybe,
what he has
maybe
to say.
schedule that for an upcoming meeting. I don't know what his schedule is, so I can check with him and invite him to come to one of the meetings and have a conversation about it.
Sounds good.
great. Let's see, that's, I believe, are there any other updates?
Nope.
Any other business? Oh, no. Nora, do you have any update on Reynolds Farm Way?
So Reynolds Farm, we've been working with the Conservation Commission to try and find a solution to the work that has remained incomplete for many years there. One of the Conservation Commission members, Stephen David, has been speaking to the developer, Eddie Musto, and his financial backer. The town has hired Beta to do an analysis of what work remains to be done both in the public right-of-way and on the private property. And that came up with an estimate of approximately $550,000 worth of work. Now that is based on prevailing wages, so the assumption would be that's how much it would cost if the town contracted out the work. If Mr. Musto contracts out the work, it will be significantly less. So he's now working with a contractor to get an actual bid price for the work, which hopefully would be well less than that. Hopefully would be
Who's
less
working?
than Ed
Eddie?
Musto,
Eddie
yes.
Musto.
He would not do the work. He would finance the work, or his financial backer would put funds in a passbook account that the town would control, but we would not be contracted with the person who would be doing the work. That would be
This is
with
the
Eddie.
work in the public way?
This is both work, and there's two sets of work. There's work in the public way, which is under $30,000 worth of work, and there's work on the private site, which is well
This is
over.
just to get this thing done.
This is just to get it finished. So it's very expensive. Now, I will say that there's probably not that much equity left in the property. There's one unit that's unsold. That unit has a value of somewhere between $600,000 and $650,000, and it has encumbrances on it. So the idea is that hopefully the price that the contractor who would do the work would actually come in at is closer to $300,000 than $550,000. And if that's the case, then we will have the town's attorney draw up a contract. We'll have Mr. Musto's financer put cash into a passbook account, and the town would have a project manager control that and have this independent
Are we
contractor
still
do the work.
finding him on a daily basis?
The Conservation Commission is fining him on a daily basis. No, none of the fines have been paid.
For the $30,000 work?
It's up to, I can't remember now if it's $100 a day or $300 a day for the work that hasn't been done.
Public way or all the
It's
work?
really it's all the work. It's for failure to complete the project within the time of the order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission. So the work should have been finished by last
Does he have any
June.
other projects unfinished?
He doesn't have any other ongoing projects. He has other property he owns in
Right.
town that's not developed.
And is there anything there that we can say?
I don't know what his,
What's our legal standing there? What-
He's not able to pull any
right,
permits.
we're not allowing him to work on any of his properties. We're not allowing him to take out a permit as a contractor or as a property owner
But he could
until
go
he
through
solves
this
this.
process if he was looking to do an over 55 community somewhere.
He could apply for a permit, but
But
this
nothing
board
would
would
happen.
not issue a permit.
And
We
no
would,
ins-
we would
and no
instruct you not to issue a
inspections.
permit as long as he's in violation.
So-
In addition to the work that's not completed, he's in violation of the special permit by not paying fees to the Westwood Housing Authority. That was a condition of the special permit. For every time he sold a unit, he had to pay 1% to the Housing Authority as his affordable housing component, and he's at least 2 of the houses have sold without him making payments. So for that reason, he's in violation, and that allows us not to consider additional permits for him. We don't have to issue permits to property owners who owe us money.
So the 300, does that take care of all of the issues like the flooding and the
That's,
streets?
that's hopeful. So there's a very extensive, I don't know, a list of items that were either not completed or were improperly completed. There's improper grading that leads to poor drainage. Within the public right-of-way, there are structures that are not located horizontally in the right location and vertically not located at the depths that they should be.
This
So
whole project is
those have to be
so
replaced.
bad.
It's a disaster.
But there's a lot of on-site grading that's just not properly done, and it's not
So
functioning.
it's grading, not a drain.
It's both, but in many cases, the simple solution of replacing the drain won't do it because the grading is puddling in a location different from where the drain was put in.
here and
Yeah.
the water is here. It's like,
So there's a lot of work, and that's why the price tag came out as high as it did. Now, that's at prevailing wages, so prevailing wages are generally at least 30% higher, but the hope is that a contractor getting out there, doing it all at once would give a price that's much lower. If it can't be done for $300,000 or somewhere in that range, I'm not sure what the next step is. The town will certainly have to handle its work within the public right-of-way because we can't consider to continue to have a nuisance. But the work that's within the site, I believe that'll be up to the homeowners to continue with their process. They have an attorney who's filed suit against Eddie. So, you know, it's a circular discussion because in order for this process to go forward, the homeowners association would have to drop their lawsuit and participate in this process. So it would have to be, they'd have to feel comfortable that this would resolve the issues. So there's a lot of discussion still going on, and I don't expect it to be resolved before at least 2 weeks from now, probably closer to a month.
so it sounds like our remedy or our sort of thing is we're not issuing permits and all, and
No inspections.
so that's sort of it just
Well,
blocks. But
he
we
has a
don't.
big plot of land that he's already gotten one approval to
Right.
from this board
Well, he's got
on Blue Hill.
yeah, he's got a
Canton
standalone.
Terrace.
Yeah, but that's gonna expire in
It's like
a year?
we
We gave it to him a year ago, didn't we?
So he has what he received on the Canton Terrace parcel is a zoning freeze by filing a subdivision plan,
Right.
and that freezes the zoning for 7 years.
Right.
But he
So that
doesn't have a special
doesn't
permit
help.
to do any work on that
Right, but he
property.
has basically he has a marker, he has a placeholder.
A placeholder that was good for
Right.
7 years, so
Right,
there's
but it
probably
gives him
5.5
the right to
years
build under
left.
Under a worse.
It gets him a right to
scenario.
apply for a special permit under the senior residential development as opposed to under the
Well, the
open
old-
space
Which gives,
development.
which gives the board far more latitude to deny.
It does, it
project
does, right.
than
So-
The current one,
Right.
under the OSRD.
But so he can't submit permits for that work, but he can sell his property to someone else
Yeah,
who
obviously, yeah.
Sure.
can apply for permits. So he's not completely,
Are there any more 3 bedrooms at Reynolds Farm accidentally built in the second floor?
there's one which we will address after we get the rest of the problem solved, so. They were all supposed to be 2-bedroom units, and one has an illegal apartment created in it.
Plaster accidentally plastered the attic space in the second floor to create a 3rd bedroom. And he asked for forgiveness after the fact. It's very frustrating.
So discussions are ongoing. It's in everyone's interest to get to a resolution on this, and I think everyone is working diligently to get to that point. Mr. Musto, his financer, the homeowners association,
gotta get
and the
fixed.
town. We're trying to get to a solution, but we're just not there yet.
It was very useful after that hearing. The whole Conservation Commission and Steve Olenoff and I went out there and looked at the situation. And it was interesting to go from having a year ago or so approved the plans to see like where the pipes actually are and everything. And it also was very, people really appreciated that we were taking time out on a Saturday to go look at stuff. So, I mean, I don't know, I think you can feel like, what can we do? But, you know, it's just, I think it'd be good for us to do things like that, to kind of be active and engaged out there. So, anyway, are there any other items tonight? If not,
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.
Okay, before you leave, though, we have 2 sheets for you to sign.